Israel has extended a matrix of control. What I call a matrix of control over the West Bank that's intended to transform the occupation into a permanent political fact, to incorporate the West Bank in a way that it can never be detached from Israel. There can never be a viable Palestinian state, and essentially to reconfigure the country so that it is one state. Now the problem we'll talk about in a minute is we want one state. This is the land of Israel, it's integral, but we don't want the Palestinians. Because if we get the land and the Palestinians, it's not a Jewish state anymore. So that's the real issue. How do we keep the land and keep control of the land, but somehow get these people off our hands? And we'll come back to that in a minute. So one of the things that's been done, there's a few things, I'll just go over really quick the elements of the matrix of control. One is, of course, that the West Bank has been fragmented into 70 little islands. Islands that we call areas A and B. And I won't get into all the details, but 95% or more of the Palestinians are locked into these 70 islands on, in the end, 40% of the West Bank. So the other 60%, which is under complete Israeli control, the white areas, that we call Area C, right, that Israel wants to annex, these Area C is where the settlements are located. So another element in the matrix of control is settlements. Israel has built 250 settlements in the West Bank since 1967. 500,000 Israelis live there. And just to put it in some perspective, the occupied territories are an area roughly the size of Delaware, which is not the largest state in the Union, with 5 times the population of Delaware. And so imagine taking Delaware with 5 times the population, which it must be a piece of Oregon, but take Delaware with 5 times the population, and then put all those people into 40% of Delaware, and then shatter that 40% into 70 little islands. And you begin to get a sense, and then the Pennsylvanians come in and build settlements all around. And you begin to get a sense of what we mean. Or Sarah Palin's Russians come in and do that, make you more accurate. All right. And in order to enforce the fragmentation, it's hard to see, I think, from where you are, but there's all these little triangles. These are checkpoints. The closure is another part of the matrix of control. So Israel has put in 650 obstacles to movement for Palestinians. So imagine now Delaware shattered into 70 little pieces, everybody living on 40% of the land, and then 650 obstacles to movement from one little island to another in Delaware. Look how small, you see, look at how small, here's 2 islands, here's a couple islands right here. See how small they are? Some of the Palestinian areas, so that then Israel established the settlements, and in addition to that, these 650 checkpoints and earthen mounds over the entrances and exits of Palestinian villages and towns and cities in order to enforce this fragmentation. The idea being that Palestinians, you know, this is now, the closure is now 15 years old. The idea being that Palestinians get used to living in very constricted areas. So they begin to get used to the idea that they're not going to get a state on the whole West Bank. They're not going to, you know, to disabuse them of the aspiration that they're going to get this expansive state on 22% of the country. No, you're going to get a Bantustan, you're going to get something little. It'll be a little bit more than this. So in other words, it's, you know, there's a famous Jewish story, it's exactly that you probably know about the goat. you know, where a woman is living with her family in a very crowded, you know, a little house, and it's very crowded. She goes to the rabbi and says, "What can I do? You know, my house is crowded." He says, "Bring in a goat." What? Okay, so she brings in a goat, and the next week she comes back and she says, "Rabbi, Jesus, it's worse now. It's, you know, got all and the goat." He says, "Bring in a cow." All right, the rabbi says, so she brings in a cow. And then next week she goes back, she says, "Rabbi, it's impossible. There's goats, there's a cow, there's the kids, my husband, in this whole place." The rabbi says, "Take out the goat and the cow." And she comes back and says, "Wow, what a big place I have. You know, it's great. You know, all this space without..." And I think that's exactly the idea. The idea being that here we're living inside these little tiny islands. The day that Israel establishes a Bantustan in the South African sense, because Israel's talking about combining these into cantons. A canton in the north, a canton in the south, in the center, a canton in the south, and Gaza, all separated by the settlements. Well, once these islands come together a little bit, even into a little canton, people say, "Wow, look at all the space we have. We can go from Jenin to Nablus to Qalqilia with no checkpoints. Wow, we're free." In other words, you lower expectations to a point where then when you impose a Bantustan that's really a prison state, it seems to the people like it's a better thing, it's a good thing because you've got all that space. That's this part of the matrix of control.